My name is Chloe. I am 28 years old, and my husband is burying me alive. He does it without a shovel, without a single stone. He is building my mausoleum out of silence, and we live inside it together. Our high-rise apartment, with its floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the rain-slicked streets of Everfall, has become a pristine, soundless tomb. Daniel still comes home every night. At precisely 6:30, he removes his shoes, places them on the rack, hangs his coat. He moves with a liquid grace that has become horrifying to me. He makes no sound. He is a ghost in the life we built. He eats the food I cook. He will sit at our polished oak table, the one we spent a whole Saturday arguing happily about, and he will eat every bite. He never looks at me. His eyes are fixed on his plate, or the window, or some point in the middle distance I cannot reach. He still sleeps in our bed. The vast, king-size landscape of white linen feels like a frozen lake separating two continents. He keeps to his side with a discipline that is surgical. There is no accidental touch in the night, no warmth seeping across the divide. His breathing is the only sound he allows himself to make in my presence, a slow, steady rhythm that counts down the seconds of my torment. "How was your day?" I asked last night. My voice sounded unnervingly loud in the quiet kitchen, brittle and thin. He was rinsing his plate. He paused, his back to me. A long, drawn-out moment stretched between us. "Fine," he said. One word. Not angry, not cold, just empty. A hollowed-out sound. He placed the plate in the dishwasher, the soft click of the ceramic against the rack echoing like a gunshot. I am being punished. I know this. This is his method. Daniel has never been a man of grand, explosive gestures. His anger isn't a forest fire, it's a glacier. Slow, silent, and utterly unstoppable. It carves canyons into you without making a sound. He wants me to break. He wants me to scream, to cry, to shatter into a million pieces so he can sweep me up without a word. Tonight, I tried something different. A desperate, pathetic gambit. As I was clearing the table, my hand slipped. The ceramic dinner plate, part of the wedding set his mother gave us, fell to the floor and exploded. The crash was magnificent, a violent, satisfying roar that tore through the oppressive quiet. I held my breath, waiting. For a shout, a curse, a flicker of something in his eyes, anything. Daniel didn't even flinch. He walked calmly to the utility closet, retrieved the dustpan and brush, and began methodically sweeping the porcelain shards into a neat pile. He moved around me as if I were a piece of furniture, a lamp he had to navigate. His focus was entirely on the task, on erasing the evidence of the one sound I had managed to create. When he was finished, he disposed of the fragments and returned the dustpan to the closet. He did it all without meeting my eyes. Not once. I stood there, my heart hammering against my ribs, feeling more invisible than I ever have in my entire life. Later, as I lay in bed, staring at the rigid line of his back, I knew the truth. He wasn't just trying to break me, he was trying to erase me. And God help me, I think he was succeeding. It wasn't always like this. I close my eyes, and I can almost feel it, the warmth. Before the frost set in, I remember the way Daniel used to look at me, like I was a puzzle he was endlessly fascinated by. He wasn't a poet, he was a risk consultant for a major investment firm. His world was numbers, projections, calculated certainties. And I, a curator at a downtown art gallery, was his beautiful, chaotic variable. He loved that. He wasn't loud about his love, it was in the small things. The way he'd have a coffee waiting for me in the morning, exactly how I liked it. The way he'd slip his hand into the small of my back when we walked into a crowded room. He wasn't a man of flourishing compliments, but one night, as I was getting ready for a gallery opening, he came up behind me and whispered into my hair, "You make everything else in the world look black and white, Chloe." That was Daniel, quiet, profound, and steady. But steadiness, I learned, can feel a lot like standing still. The promotions came, one after another. He was brilliant at his job, and the firm knew it. Our apartment got bigger, the views got better. The future he was building for us, the one he talked about in low, serious tones, was solidifying. But the man building it was becoming a stranger. The late nights at the office became the norm. The business trips grew longer. When he was home, his mind was often elsewhere, lost in spreadsheets and market fluctuations. The puzzle he used to be fascinated by was now, it seemed, solved and put away on a shelf. I became part of the scenery of his success. A beautiful painting on the wall of the life he had built, admired but not truly seen. And then Leo walked into my gallery. Leo was not a puzzle, he was a declaration. An artist. His canvases were bold, chaotic explosions of color, and he was the same. He walked into a room, and the very air seemed to rearrange itself around him. He had a way of looking at you, a focused intensity that made you feel like you were the only person in the universe. "You have an incredible eye, Chloe," he said during our first meeting, his gaze lingering on me, not the art. "You don't just see the paintings. You understand the soul behind them." No one had talked about my soul in years. Our conversations started under the guise of his upcoming exhibition. We'd have long lunches that stretched into the afternoon. He'd talk about art, passion, and living a life that wasn't a compromise, and he would listen. He'd ask about my dreams, the ones I had before I became Mrs. Daniel Thorne. He made me feel like I was still that girl, full of fire and possibility. Daniel provided for my life. Leo made me feel like I was living it. The first time it happened, it was raining. A classic Everfall downpour. We were caught in it after a late meeting. Laughing. We ducked into a small, dark bar. The conversation flowed as easily as the wine. He reached across the table and tucked a stray, rain-dampened strand of my hair behind my ear. His fingers brushed against my cheek. It was a simple gesture, but it was a spark in a house filled with gas fumes. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself I deserved a little attention, a little warmth. Daniel had been in Zurich for 2 weeks. He'd called twice, both times when I was already half asleep. I didn't tell myself that I was setting our world on fire. I just told myself I was cold and Leo was warm. It was a simple, selfish, human truth, and it felt for a moment like salvation. The affair was a fever. It consumed me. The lies became a second language. A late meeting at the gallery, dinner with the girls, an art-buying trip for the weekend. Each one was easier than the last. The guilt was a dull hum beneath the thrilling, roaring symphony of being desired again. With Leo, I was vibrant, I was witty, I was breathtaking. I saw myself reflected in his eyes, and I loved the woman I saw there. She wasn't the lonely wife waiting in a silent apartment. She was art. She was passion. At home, I played my part. I was the dutiful wife. I would ask about Daniel's day, listen to his talk of market trends, and nod along. I convinced myself I was doing him a favor. I was happier, more energetic. Wasn't that better for him too? Our life together was a fragile glass sculpture, and I believed I could keep my secret life separate, a hidden world that would never cause a single crack. I was a fool. The day it shattered was a Tuesday. It was unremarkable in every way. Daniel came home at his usual time. I was in the kitchen, preparing salmon, his favorite. He walked past me, into the bedroom to change. My phone was on the kitchen counter. It buzzed. A text message. From Leo. I didn't think anything of it. My heart didn't even skip a beat. That's how comfortable I had become in my deception. Daniel walked back into the kitchen. He had changed into his gray sweatpants and a soft t-shirt. He looked tired. He picked up my phone. He never touched my phone, but he picked it up, his thumbprint unlocking it in a gesture so casual it made my blood run cold. I saw his shoulders tense, just a slight, almost imperceptible tightening. He stood there for what felt like an eternity, his back to me, staring at the screen. The silence that followed was different. It wasn't the comfortable quiet of routine. This was a heavy, suffocating silence. The silence of a vacuum. He turned around slowly. His face was a blank canvas. Not a trace of anger, or sadness, or anything. It was the complete absence of emotion that terrified me. Who is he? Daniel's voice was perfectly level, flat. My mind raced, tumbling through 1,000 lies. "It's just a colleague," I stammered, my voice a squeak. "From the gallery. We were just joking about the installation." He didn't raise his voice. He didn't move. He just held the phone out, turning the screen towards me. The message glowed in the dimming light of the kitchen. "Leo, I can't stop thinking about the scent of your skin this morning." He held it there. He let me read it. He let me see the end of our world spelled out in blue and white. "A colleague?" he asked again, the words perfectly articulated, perfectly calm. And then, nothing. He placed the phone down on the counter, gently, as if it were made of spun glass. He walked into the living room, sat down on the sofa, and turned on the television. He didn't yell. He didn't throw things. He didn't demand an explanation. He just stopped. He stopped being my husband. He stopped being my friend. He stopped acknowledging my existence. That was the night the silence began. I tried to talk to him. I followed him into the living room, a torrent of excuses and apologies and desperate pleas spilling from my lips. He stared at the screen, his face illuminated by the flickering light, completely, utterly unresponsive. It was like shouting at a marble statue. That night, for the first time, he built the wall between us in our bed. And I lay awake in the ruins of my own making, listening to the sound of his steady, even breathing, and realized my punishment had begun. Living with a ghost is a special kind of hell. Weeks bled into one another. The silence in the apartment became a physical presence. It was thick, heavy. It clogged my throat and pressed down on my chest. I started to feel like I was moving underwater. My own routines became frantic attempts to feel normal. I went to the gallery. I smiled at clients. I discussed brushstrokes and composition. But it was all a performance. The moment I stepped back into our apartment, the mask would fall away, and I would be alone with the ghost of my husband. He was a masterpiece of self-control. He moved through our shared space with an eerie precision, our paths never crossing. If I was in the kitchen, he was in the study. If I was in the living room, he was in the bedroom. We were two planets in a decaying orbit, held together by gravity but destined never to touch. My escape was Leo. I would flee the mausoleum and run to his loft, a chaotic, paint-splattered sanctuary. He would hold me as I cried, stroking my hair, murmuring soothing words. "This is insane, Chloe," he'd say, his voice a warm balm on my frayed nerves. "He's torturing you. You don't deserve this. Just leave him. Come be with me. We can be happy." And I would cling to him, believing it. In his arms, Daniel's silence felt like a cruel, medieval punishment. Leo's voice was the promise of a future, where I was heard, where I was seen. But then I would go home, and the hope would die the moment I walked through the door. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. The pressure had been building inside me for weeks, a silent scream I couldn't release. Daniel was in bed, reading, his back to me as always. I slid out of my side of the bed and knelt on the floor beside him. The carpet was rough against my knees. I reached out and put a trembling hand on his arm. He flinched, a tiny, almost invisible reaction, but I felt it like an electric shock. "Daniel, please," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. My voice was hoarse. "Please, just talk to me, scream at me, hit me, anything. Just don't do this. Please." I was begging, groveling. The confident woman from the gallery was gone. The passionate lover in Leo's arms was gone. All that was left was this desperate, broken creature on the floor. For a moment, I thought I saw something shift in his shoulders, a hesitation. Then, slowly, deliberately, he reached over with his other hand. He didn't push me away. He simply lifted my hand off his arm, held it for a fraction of a second, and then placed it back in my lap as if it were a misplaced object. Then he turned the page of his book. The rejection was so absolute, so gentle, that it broke something deep inside me. It wasn't an act of anger. It was an act of finality. I started to become paranoid. I'd watch him pack for his business trips, my stomach twisting in knots, convinced this would be the time he wouldn't come back. I'd search his study for hidden boxes, for any sign that he was preparing to leave me. But there was nothing. Just his meticulous order, his suffocating control. He wasn't leaving me. He was just waiting for me to disappear. The next day, I called Leo. My voice was a dead thing. "You're right," I said, the words feeling like stones in my mouth. "I can't do this anymore. I'm going to leave him." The relief in Leo's voice was immediate. But as I hung up the phone, all I felt was a vast, terrifying emptiness. I wasn't running towards a new life. I was just running away from the silence. I packed a single suitcase, just the essentials. The rest of my life, the life I had shared with Daniel for 6 years, I left in the closets and drawers. It felt like shedding a skin. I wrote a letter. A cowardly, self-serving letter full of phrases like, "I know I hurt you, but..." and I need to find my own happiness. I placed it on my pillow, but when I heard his key in the lock at 6:30, I knew the letter wasn't enough. I needed to be the one to end this. I needed to say the words out loud, to take back some small piece of control. I stood in the entryway, blocking his path. The suitcase was by my feet, a silent testament to my decision. He stopped. He looked at the suitcase, then he looked at me. It was the first time he had made direct eye contact with me in 52 days. I had counted. His eyes, once warm and full of life, were hollowed out. They were the eyes of a stranger. "I'm leaving, Daniel," I said, my voice shaking slightly. I took a breath, steeling myself. "Before I go, I just need you to understand that. You think this was about punishing you?" He spoke. His voice, after so long, was a shock to the system. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry. It was weary. A deep, profound weariness that seemed to emanate from his very bones. I was so stunned I couldn't speak. He took a step closer, and for the first time, I saw the toll the silence had taken on him too. There were new lines around his eyes. He looked thinner, older. "You think I enjoyed this, Chloe?" he continued, his voice low and raw. "This silence? This wasn't a punishment for you, it was a shield for me." He gestured vaguely around the apartment, at the life we had built. "Every time I looked at you, I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask you how you could lie to my face, day after day. How you could sleep in my bed after you had been with him. I wanted to say things that I could never take back. Vicious, ugly things. Because what you did was vicious and ugly." I flinched, the truth of his words hitting me like a physical blow. All my carefully constructed justifications, my narrative of being the neglected victim, began to crumble. "So I said nothing," he went on, his voice cracking for the first time. "The silence was the only way I could keep a single shred of the man I was before I picked up your phone. It was the only way I could get through the day without completely shattering. I wasn't punishing you, Chloe." He looked me straight in the eye, and the emptiness was gone. In its place was a pain so deep it was almost black. I was mourning. I was holding a funeral for us, for everything we were. And I had to do it in silence, because you were still here. He stepped past me and walked towards his study. My legs felt weak. The entire narrative of the past 2 months had been a lie, I told myself. He wasn't the cruel warden. He was the grieving widower. And I was the ghost haunting my own home. He came back holding a manila envelope. He laid it on the entryway table next to my suitcase. "The funeral is over now," he said, his voice flat once more. "The divorce papers are already signed. My lawyer will be in touch with yours." And just like that, he walked into our bedroom and closed the door, leaving me alone in the hallway with my suitcase, my pathetic letter, and the deafening sound of my world finally, completely, breaking apart. 6 months later, I was living in Leo's loft. The space that had once felt like a sanctuary of passion and creativity now just felt messy. Canvases were stacked against every wall, the air was thick with the smell of turpentine, and his clothes were perpetually in a heap on the floor. The charismatic artist I had fallen for was, in the harsh light of everyday life, just a man-child who couldn't remember to buy milk. The thrilling conversations about art and life were replaced by arguments about unpaid bills and whose turn it was to take out the trash. The intense, soul-seeing gaze he used to give me was now often directed at his phone or at the pretty young intern who had started helping him at his studio. I realized, with a sickening lurch, that I hadn't been special. I had just been the latest project. He didn't love me. He loved the drama of me. He loved the conquest of a beautiful, married woman. Once I was just Chloe, divorced and living in his loft, the thrill was gone. I was no longer a forbidden masterpiece. I was just a print he'd grown tired of looking at. One crisp autumn afternoon, I was walking home from a job interview the gallery had politely let me go a few months back, citing restructuring when I saw him. It was Daniel. He was coming out of a small cafe, laughing. He was with a woman. She wasn't a model or an artist. She looked kind, normal. She tucked her arm through his, and he smiled down at her. It was a real smile. A light, easy smile that reached his eyes. A smile I hadn't seen in years. He looked thinner, yes, but he also looked free. The weight that he had carried for so long was gone. He looked like himself again. They walked past me. So close I could have reached out and touched his coat. They didn't see me. To them, I was just another anonymous face on a busy city street, a ghost. I stood frozen on the sidewalk, the cold,